2026, and we're kicking off XOG on the road. We're going to be traveling, guys, traveling. And to do it up on opening weekend, I have decided to do a dumb thing. I will be in Washington on the 13th at Rowdy Audi, Boston on the 14th for the Boston Legacy debut against Gotham, and at BMO for Angel City's game against the Chicago Stars on Sunday. Yikes.
If you are in any of those markets, be sure to come say hi before the game to Eric. And we plan to try and hit all 16 markets this year. I will be in New Jersey for Gotham FC against the Orlando Pride on Sunday, March 29th. And watch this space for more dates to come. In the meantime, if you are a fan of the show, we are doing a big Patreon sale where you can get an annual membership for a big discount, so be sure to use the code in the show notes for that. And we have launched a store. We have an official XOG store where you can get all the best merch for the start of the NWSL season, and Patreon members get 20% off with an exclusive discount code for that. So those are all the fun little goodies from us. Stay tuned for the show.
Hello, and welcome to Expected Own Goals, One Bad Apple edition. I'm your host, Eric Morgan.
And I'm Evan Davis. Welcome to XOG NWSL Season Preview Week. You might notice that we are in different surroundings for this intro. That's because we were recording these intros a little bit later than the main conversation. That is entirely because we have some important news not to break, but to report regarding the Utah Royals roster. The Kiana Palacios transfer, which had been rumored, got confirmed for $800,000.
It's a lot of money.
It seems to have solved, quote unquote, the Utah Royals number 9 center forward issue. And Manny McGlynn was sent home from U.S. women's national team camp for a finger injury. One hopes that is simply precautionary, because why aggravate something that is bothering you for a meaningless friendly when you've got a professional season to start? But if it is more serious than that and she misses time, boy, it could get ugly very quickly in Utah, which is the theme of our main conversation with Catalina Bush today.
Boy, Utah's in trouble, aren't they?
Yeah, it's going to be rough. Well, here in Season 3 of Utah Royals 2.0, we ask ourselves, is this the year they finally kick on? Or will we only get a blip come August where they will fool us yet again as to the level of their talent? No person better to walk us through what is going on in Sandy, Utah, than our old friend and the creator of ASA VizHub, Catalina Bush. Kat, welcome to Main Feed.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my first time on.
All right, Kat, starting you off with the softball. Tell us the history of the Utah Royals.
Well, they were bad, and then for a second, as Evan said, we thought that they might not be bad, and then they just kept being bad, and they've been bad since.
Yeah, it's almost as if when you don't spend money, this is what happens. 12th on points in 2025, nothing in the underlying data to suggest they were any better than that. The shape of the squad is different than it was last year. Key players have moved on. Several key players have come in. And yet there is a nagging, gnawing void at the center of the roster. What is the state of this club as the offseason comes to its conclusion and the regular season looms?
You know, you mentioned the players that have come in this offseason. To me, looking at the business they've done, it isn't bad business, right? Like, they have many free agent signings, like they brought in some key players, but I think it would be a good window if they already had a team that could compete and, maybe this is what powers them over the playoff line. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think they have that team that can really build off of these additions and perform better. It just feels like you said, there's this missing piece. And with Claudia Sornosa leaving, and also just Ali Sentner. I mean, we've made jokes about Ali Sentner in the past, and, she wasn't the best player at the Utah Royals, but she was at least something. She was some kind of hope moving forward. And it doesn't feel like there's really anything or any player like that on the roster right now. And so it feels like this team is really lacking bright spots or players that can, you look at them and you say, okay, that's a difference maker. And I'm not necessarily convinced that they brought any in this offseason.
I suppose to get a little more global with it, your Ali Sentner point's a good one. do you think it is even possible to succeed at the Utah Royals as a player given this current setup? Like, or is this a place that like the sum total of the talent means that it is very challenging for anyone to distinguish themselves and break through?
I think it is very, very challenging. I think if you come into the Utah Royals, regardless of really what position you're playing, and even if it is like that talent upgrade for Utah, there's so much burden on that player to succeed and to help the team succeed. And there's so little help around them that it does just feel like that hypothetical player would be doomed to fail. I don't really see that kind of team structure there that's ready to just add one more piece and then succeed. Because even if they do add that piece, which they should, I'm not convinced it's going to be, a home run.
Along those lines, the running theme ever since the Utah Royals rebooted a couple of years ago under the auspices of Kelly Cousins running the front office is chase international free agents. Not necessarily at the top of the pay scale, but players from overseas who are not American, who can potentially be gotten for reasonably affordable deals. And we've seen that again with them bringing Diana Pierre-Louis over from the Premier League in France. They've got, several internationals who have NWSL experience, of course, with Narumi and Miyabi as well. We've already had you on to talk about like what expansion looks like when we don't have drafts to pull players from anymore. But in the third go round of Utah's newest existence, what do you think they're going for with this approach, which they're not really moving on from?
I think in an ideal world, it works kind of in the way that you bring in these players and they just raise the floor of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And you have kind of maybe not, as you said, the stars, but like the players that are really going to raise the base level and ensure that this team is playing at 8th at a minimum instead of 12th or 14th at a minimum. I don't think we've seen that really work in practice. And I'm not necessarily sure I'm against the strategy. I mean, I feel like signing foreign players who, like you said, are on kind of the lower end of the pay scale can be a good way of saving money and of kind of exploiting the cap in a certain way to get the players who, aren't going to take up a bunch of your cap space. But I think if you're going to do that, then you need to make use of the rest of your cap. And it doesn't seem like they're doing that. So then I'm like, what's the point of this, right? Like if you can get a player for a little bit less or a player who's better but is going to cost more, then why not just get the player who's going to cost a little bit more if you're not going to kind of use those savings anyway? Maybe it's just a lack of a willingness to invest or really a lack of ambition in terms of working with the cap. But that's kind of the feeling that I get with this strategy.
Maybe just highlight like Yanni Thompson, who I think was moderately successful last year in Utah, and brought a sort of creative spark out of the back that was incredibly useful for them. And yet Yanni Thompson is 26, not 22. It also feels like they're shopping in prime years internationally as opposed to sort of speculating. Do you feel like that's a problem that Utah has that's just baked into being Utah as opposed to, say, being Angel City? Or do you think that Utah is trying to kind of have their cake and eat it too with finding value at its peak?
I think probably a little bit of both. This is like, as you said, it's an old squad. Like they don't have a lot of these young players. Trying to convince people to go to Utah isn't going to be as successful as trying to convince players to go to LA, especially young people. But I do think that that's a challenge that every sports team has. And sports teams figure out a way to get around that. And they use salaries as an example of maybe it's going to cost a little bit more to convince a younger player to come here, but it's worth it because they have that upside. And it doesn't feel like Utah is really trying to take that strategy on their squad. Like, really, I think, and you guys can disagree with me here, but I think the only players that I would consider really young players are Diana Pierre-Louis and KK Ream. And I don't know if there are other kind of quote unquote youngsters on this team. So I'm just curious as to like really what they're trying to do here, because I think every team, if they want to succeed in the long term, should have those kind of younger players to replace the aging stars, right? And continuously replacing with mid-prime to post-prime players, I don't think is going to give you like the long-term squad veterans that you want, especially as a newer team.
Yeah, the distribution of ages is kind of interesting. Like the median squad age of the whole group is the oldest in the NWSL, 27. However, They only have 2 players over the age of 30. So you're bang on the money. There are so many players between the ages of like 27 and 29 that comprise the group that theoretically, if you're really weighting age curves heavily, should allow you short-term success, but it's not going to allow you sustained success. And they're not even getting the short-term success. Do you have any hope that the new ownership, now that Gail Miller is sort of got her feet under her and has a full offseason ahead of her, has a different approach or different ambitions to what David Blitzer had when he formed the club? I don't get that impression, which is very depressing because usually new ownership, especially in this league, means more spending. Not always, but often it does. Is there any optimism maybe that come the summer they'll finally start opening the checkbook?
I mean, maybe, but I kind of, when they did the coaching change and they brought in Jimmy Conrads, I was like, okay, I wonder, this is something different. It's a new direction. Maybe this can give the team a boost, at least kind of psychologically, morally, right? Like moving on from a coach where you suffered some really bad results, like let's get a new coach in. And then nothing changed. And so I would hope that maybe kind of in the front office, there's a bit more ambition there, but it's really hard to know. And I don't know. I think kind of this off season, like I said, it's not bad business, but you've got to make a big signing at one point or another. And so if that doesn't happen in the summer, I wonder, when will it happen? Will it happen? Or will this continue to be the strategy that they take moving forward?
Do you trust this front office to make a big signing and do it efficiently, to like actually identify a player and bring in a high level talent that can change the fortune of the team?
Because interestingly, Kelly Cousins is the one piece of continuity. Like the original head coach is gone, the original owners are gone, but Cousins remains.
Yeah, I really don't think that that's going to happen. Maybe there are some other teams that kind of you think maybe, okay, with obviously the high impact rule, which is currently, embroiled in everything that's happening with the NWSL Players Association. And so we don't know if that'll stick around, but there are teams who you could kind of picture utilizing that rule or wanting to use that rule to make a bigger signing. And Utah is not one of those teams, at least in my mind.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think back on to those like Amy Rodriguez preseason, pre-debut quotes about like wanting to compete for championships right out of the chute, and has aged as one of the more delusional things a coach has said in league history. Do you feel like this is a situation that any coach could succeed in? And do you feel like Jimmy Conrads is the right person for the job, or is just simply doing like kind of a bang average with what he's got, or maybe overperforming with what he's got?
I would say I think any coach would struggle in this kind of setup. And I think like you need a really exceptional coach to kind of succeed and make this team a playoff team that can really contend. Like I don't think Jimmy Conrads is like massively overperforming or underperforming. I think this is kind of where this squad is at. Like I'm looking at the projected lineup and it's like, this is not a team projected lineup. Like what's happening here? I don't think, like I said at the beginning of the show, I don't think the offseason is really going to kind of raise that very much.
You squint and you think, all right, there's a decent amount of NWSL experience between Manny McGlynn, Kaylee Reel, and Kate Del Fava. Miyabi Moriya flashed some quality, but also wasn't a consistent member of the 11 when she was at Angel City last year. Yanni Thompson was one of the better performers for the club. Narumi, Miura, and Ane Tejada have plenty of experience being pretty defensively steely. You think, could they maybe just be grinders? Be some kind of launch and squish group that can absorb a ton of pressure and maybe grab the occasional goal? And then I look at who they might be putting in at the number 9, and I erase all of that from my mind. Like, how do you set a group up like this for, if not success, for at least some measure of like performative stability?
Claudia Sornosa was like, if you look at her contribution to the team in terms of passing volume, progressive passing, expected assists, she was one of the top players in the NWSL in terms of how much burden she was taking on at the Utah Royal. Nearly like over 20% of the team's progressive passing and expected assists came from her, which was near the top of the league. And of course touches too. And I don't like, you can't replace like, if you're trying to replace that in the aggregate, I think they've done an okay job at trying to do that, but I don't think they're going to successfully do it. And if you don't have that kind of core solid, like, midfielder that's really going to set the tempo and kind of control the ball when you do have it, then I don't know what's the strategy there. And then also, I guess I'm not sure I've seen anything out of Jimmy Conrads that's made me kind of really excited for a style of play that might be possible if they just had, a little bit more training and a couple different players, right? I don't think they've really kind of defined their style of play in any major way.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm like, if there's no real solid principles and you don't have solid players that have been with the team for a while and, there's so much turnover within the club, where's that solidity coming from?
It just occurred to me as we've sort of been, I don't know, this is a sort of doom and gloom episode for Utah, but what else could it have been? Is this roster worse than its day one roster in the league? Is this a worse team than existed 2 years ago, or have there been incremental improvements to make this squad better? It's like closer than you'd like that answer to be.
I think I was looking at the NetG Plus, and as far as I can tell, only 4 players have positive NetG Plus.
Yeah.
On this roster per 96 minutes, and that is Chloe Lacasse,
mm-hmm.
Alex Loera, who didn't play very many minutes for Utah, Aria Nagai, who also didn't play very many minutes, and Narumi Miura, who's a new signing and was playing at a much better team than the Utah Royals last season.
Yeah.
So this team is just like, it's all in the negative.
And theoretically, if Lacasse plays, then maybe you can say there's some attacking juice there, but she's also going into her age 33 season. And she was hurt a lot last year. So how much can you really expect to get? Otherwise, you're leaning on moving Brecca Mazingo centrally or going with Lara Prajnikar, who in her cup of coffee, didn't exactly like set the world on fire. Like, where the hell did goals come from in this group? Like Mina Tanaka is also too old to like rely on for, both chance creation and chance taking. Like, it's just maddening.
They need someone like that's going to come out of nowhere and score goals for them to really even just like be competitive in games. And they don't have the players on the roster that like have that upside to be able to come out of nowhere and do that. Like maybe you could have said that Ali Sentner could have been that player. And, there was a lot of hype of like, maybe it'll be this season, maybe it'll be this season. And then it obviously didn't happen and now she's gone. And so you haven't replaced her really. Who's that player that's going to be the like X factor or the unknown factor that you can think maybe is gonna actually score some goals? Because otherwise, like you said, this attack feels very, very limp.
At what point do we start Mandy McGlynn transfer watch?
That's the right question.
That's the right next question. She's under contract for 4 more years, and boy, I wonder what she's thinking about that extension when she signed it last year. At this point, because that is a large chunk of time for someone who is like competing for a World Cup spot to be in a situation like this. It might be nice to get peppered all the time, but it's also got to be pretty exhausting to be the literal best player on your squad.
Arguably the best progression option.
Yeah, I don't think it's
like as a long range passer.
I mean, hey, maybe she'll go to Boston.
Take poor Casey Murphy's job. That would be rough. I feel like
they need another goalkeeper.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like the question, and let's try to be at least, we've really done the doom and gloom. Let's try to be a little optimistic here. Let's give Utah, and we can roundtable this. We give them the option of 3 signings. What are we signing for Utah? Like priorities in the market. What are you going and getting?
I would say kind of young winger, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Word someone that can really either play the 9 or just kind of provide some dynamic passing, progression, carrying, dribbling on the wing. They do have some solid midfield pieces. No one, as I said, like Claudia Sornosa, but I do think they have like multiple pieces there. Probably someone to back up Tanaka and like also young. And then apart from that, I really like, I don't know, I think everywhere else could use some work too. So
yeah, my first thought was just that there is a real depth issue here, even though the squad is, CBA compliant in terms of its size. The quality at each position is just very, very shallow. And so in terms of immediate fixes, I think I'd go with a number 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a sub 25-year-old number 9 who can bag you maybe 5, 6, 7 goals, at least make your goal scoring total respectable by the end of the year. and then grab some depth pieces, especially in the back line, where like if any of those players get injured, I think it spells real disaster potentially in trying to keep the ball out of the net. Like if Mandy McGlynn doesn't have a hard enough job trying to put this team on her shoulders, it's even worse if Real or Del Fava get hurt. And Del Fava isn't young, and Real has a bad injury history. So that's a real possibility here.
Yeah, for me, I would just be signing. I think that you keyed on the right three things. I would sign an attacker, and an attacker. No, because I actually think one of the things, if you're making like the rose-colored glasses positive case for Utah, it's that in their offseason, they have developed a truly functional midfield. It's not on the upper half of teams in this league, but all three of those theoretical starting midfielders can like do a job for you and put in a shift. And frankly, that back line, yeah, depth is exactly right. But like Real and Del Fava, like if you look at the sum total of her career, is not a net negative. And that's really saying something given where she's played. But it feels like if they could just, and they have the money to do it theoretically, if they just went and invested in like really going out and splashing in attack, this could be like a credible team, because the defense has been bad at times, but just having any amount of outlet that could take the burden off the defense might reveal a defense that's slightly better than we think it is.
Yeah. I agree.
I'm going to ask you, like, where do you think they're going to finish in the table? Like, the American Soccer Analysis projection model pegs them for 14th out of 16 clubs this year. I'm going to just say right out, I'm putting them in 16th, because I think the model might be missing on Boston because there are just so many players that it doesn't have data to like properly project. And then Chicago will get Mallory Swanson back in the second half of the year. I think that's probably enough to make sure that they don't finish at the bottom. So it's 16th for me. What about you, Kat?
Yeah, I think 14th is probably their ceiling, maybe 13th. But yeah, I think that's kind of what I wrote down in my notes was 13th through 16th.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's a world in which they get above 13th. So I think my money is probably on 16th.
Yeah, I'm going to be the high one here. I have them at 15th. And I think that it's simply that Chicago exists, and Chicago and Utah are both extraordinarily dysfunctional. But if you gave me a choice between the pieces available, as much as Mallory Swanson is the best piece on either of these two teams, I actually think that like not that far behind is Mandy McGlynn, and there's a lot of impact there. And then I think player from player outside of that, Chicago has a couple pieces that are higher end, but I actually think the baseline player is slightly better at Utah. And again, like we're talking about the difference between a team that probably ends with 27 points and a team that probably ends with 28 points.
Yeah, numbers that mean very different now that it's a 30-game season.
Yeah.
And to take people behind the curtain, like Boston projected for 15th place right now on 31 points, driven entirely by the fact that the overwhelming majority of its roster has no NWSL history and therefore has nothing to project. And so the model kind of has to default to a standard baseline, like replacement player level projection for them. They are still a point better than Chicago, just to give you a sense of like how bad Chicago's situation is. But Utah, just for the fact that it's got a bunch of players that have NWSL minutes under their belts, get 3 more points than a team with absolutely none. So that probably is ultimately a push in reality's sake.
Yeah.
And I think 16th makes all the sense in the world for them.
And frankly, I think, Utah would die to have an Amanda Gutierrez, who the model doesn't know that much about yet.
Yeah.
But who is definitely better than any attacker Utah is about to field.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, geez. Any other final thoughts you have about Utah?
Yeah. Do we need to burn some sage, cleanse the timeline a little bit?
I do feel bad, like, constantly, I guess, dooming on Utah.
They bring it on themselves.
Yeah, there's really not much else to talk about when the team is so kind of gloomy and bad. And so I wish that there was more to talk about, but at the same time, it's like they haven't shown anything that's worth talking about.
And whether this is coming from ownership or Kelly Cousins or whomever, I remember telling Eric a year or two ago that like this might not be the most desirable free agent destination. And Eric kind of pushed back and said, like, but it's a beautiful place.
It's a beautiful place. Cost of living's cheap.
Cost of living's cheap. Like, Utah could sell it as a destination. But with 3 off seasons now of sample, it is clear that no one's interested.
Yeah, or they've been asking, or the pitch has been quite bad. It's some combination of that. You want to know what bums me out now that we're really thinking about it? Is you laid out a formation for them. You put them in a 4-2-3-1, which I think is,
doesn't really mean much.
What I mean is, what I thought was good about that formation was it was probably the best way to get all of the relative talent that they have on the field at the same time. And so the thing that scares me even more, and maybe leans to your 16th, is it sort of feels like they're already maxing out on, like, they don't have like a system shift that could optimize for the talent on hand in the way that, say, like an Angel City could.
Right.
They, like, for the they don't have, like, there's just not a lot of place that like elevates them. There's no low hanging fruit in Utah beyond like signing some attackers. All of the problems are like actually complicated. And that sucks.
And as Kat mentioned earlier, at the very least, for all of Chicago's dysfunction, they do have a game changer that's going to be present for probably half the year. And that got them into the playoffs 2 years ago. So I think it probably keeps them off the bottom of the table, but we shall see. You can follow Kat on social media at @KatToBush. Be sure to visit viz.americansocceranalysis.com to pull all of the incredible charts, graphs, and data viz that Catalina creates over there.
A lot of what you're going to see on this episode.
You sure will. And until next time, Kat, you're our favorite. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to do all the things you're supposed to do with podcasts. Rate us 5 stars, drop a kind review in your podcatcher of choice, and follow along with the feed if you haven't done so already. Tell all of your friends about us if they don't know about the show up to this point. And if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so at XOwnGoals. That's the letter X Own Goals on all social platforms. Keep your eyes out on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok for a lot of cool exclusive video content there. And if you believe we've made an own goal, please email us at xog@xowngoals.com. That's the letter XOG at the letter xowngoals.com. Looking forward to our next season preview very soon.